Well, the 10-10-10 rule is simply it may take you 10 months to get a customer. You can lose them in 10 seconds. And if you're lucky, you might get them back in 10 years. And so it just goes to show you, choose your words and everything, because you can say the wrong thing in less than 10 seconds.
It takes something a little more to lead with impact. I'm Lisa Nichols, author of Something Extra, and this podcast was inspired by our daughter Allie, whose additional chromosome has shaped how I see people in leadership. Each episode features conversations with inspiring leaders from around the world about what truly defines how they lead and serve others. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please consider leaving a 5-star review. It helps more people discover the show. And if you'd like to go deeper, my book, Something Extra, is available on Amazon and through other major book retailers. Our guest today has a career story that reads like a masterclass in leadership. After 40 years at MiTek, former chairman and CEO Tom Manenti is widely recognized for his people-first philosophy and his unique experience reporting directly to Warren Buffett. Tom brings a unique perspective on what it actually takes to build a world-class organization and a legacy that transcends business success. Well, Tom Manenti, welcome, my friend, to the Something Extra podcast. I am so delighted we can make this work today.
Thank you for inviting me.
I had just been looking forward to this conversation so much because Greg and I I don't even know how long, but I know that even when you were the CEO of MiTek, we were a partner for you guys. And then we know each other. You and I serve on the board for the CEO Forum. We've got many different avenues that our lives have crossed. And just, Tom, every time we're with you guys, I mean, we're richer people because you guys are in our life. And I'm just grateful, and I'm just excited to share you with all of our listeners today and all your wisdom.
Thank you, Lisa.
Well, let's talk about this. So you did not grow up in St. Louis. You grew up in the Bronx?
I did.
In New Jersey.
Right.
Yeah? Tell me a little bit about growing up.
Yeah, I grew up in the Bronx, about 5 blocks from Yankee Stadium. And obviously we were big baseball fans. And we lived there until I was 8 years old. And then we moved to New Jersey. And my mother she was sick. She was asthmatic, and as my birth mother, I was blessed to have two mothers really in my life. And so we moved to New Jersey to try to help her. And after a year in New Jersey, she passed away, and which was a huge disruption in our family. I have an older sister, she's 3 years older than me. And we were just left without a mom. So we moved from the Bronx to New Jersey, and that was like moving to the country, and it was very foreign to us. And then we had this big rock kind of fall on us in September of 1960, but we got through all that in actually a very positive way, which was a real blessing in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Did your sister somewhat, Tom's, kind of step in as the surrogate mom, so to speak?
Well, yeah, she is the consummate big sister. We're very close to this day. We can't go a day without texting each other at least. But my dad realized that we were still kids, and he had my grandparents, my Sicilian old world grandparents, moved from the Bronx over to New Jersey. And my grandfather was a barber. He's a retired barber because he had a stroke a couple of years before that. So my grandmother she was very vocal about this. She was now the mother of the house, and it didn't sit well with my sister, quite frankly. She struggled with that a little bit. And, but you know what, everything eventually really worked out for the best. And it's hard to say that when there's been a death like that in the family, but we were very fortunate for that.
Mm-hmm. That's tough, at that age, at any age, to lose a mom, but certainly as a young boy, that had to have been really difficult. Well, I know that you eventually moved to Indiana in 1977.
I did.
And that was a huge cultural shift, wasn't it?
It
moving.
sure was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I took a job. I was working in the post office in this little New Jersey shore town called Hazlitt, and uh, I always worked two jobs at least. I was actually working three jobs at the time, not counting my reserve military duty that I was also doing at the time. And I was working in a gas station, and a guy pulled in one day I knew, and we were talking, and I was maybe having a little bit of a rough patch at working in the post office. I don't know what that would have been about, but I asked him. I said, "Hey, how do I get a job like yours?" And long story short, I got him a resume, and they had an opening in Indiana, and I almost didn't take the job because I thought, what company would I want to work for that would hire me as a salesman? My background was accounting. I was
Yeah.
working in the post office, and I'm thinking, this got to be a dysfunctional company. But the guy hired me, and yeah, moved to Indiana, and I had a sales territory. All the Great Lakes states became my sales territory, and I learned the business. And I just
Yeah.
started really at the bottom of the ladder.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, you've got some stories on sales, and we're going to get into that. You've got some philosophies there. But, one thing that I read, Tom, it was a cultural shift because you said that it was an others way of thinking, thinking outside yourself, thinking about others, right?
Yeah,
And I also think, and I think, I mean, Tom, for as long as I've known you, this is really the bedrock of who you and Kathy are. But I know that I read also that you found faith in Indiana in 1978.
it's true. Yeah, yeah. It was. I was raised Roman Catholic, and which I've always been grateful for the things I learned growing up in the Roman Catholic Church. But there was something lacking, and in Indiana it was different. Even the Roman Catholic Church was different. I started going to a Roman Catholic Church in Mishawaka, Indiana, sister city to South Bend, and you just sitting with I went to confession one day and just sat in the pew right next to the priest and had a conversation with him. It wasn't, I didn't go to a
Mhm.
booth and do all this other stuff. And it was like, wow, this is really different. So I obviously was had something inside me that was seeking, my faith, something in faith different from what I had traditionally done. And then a friend from back in New Jersey actually had led me to faith in Jesus Christ in October 1978, and that started that journey, which has been, just something I treasure.
Yeah. It changes everything, doesn't it, Tom?
Really did, yeah.
It really changes everything. Well, looking back now, how do you think accepting Jesus reshaped your leadership philosophy, everything that you've done since that time? What are some of the things? How did it shape you, reshape
Well,
you?
it made me, once I started to be more serious about my faith, it's one thing to actually, you know, go through that salvation, process, but it's another thing to, start navigating through. And I didn't have anybody really to disciple me, so to speak. So a lot of it was just, self-reading. I was a voracious reader anyway, so I would read in the Bible and I would read commentaries and things like that, and I realized that there was a way of life. You don't get faith in Jesus by doing something because he already did it. So
Yes.
you just get it by believing, by having faith in what he did for me, identifying with his substitution for me.
Hmm.
And that really made me think, well, you know, nobody says there's a code of conduct, but you come to realize there is. And God was really good. He just took a lot of things, a lot of desires for things away from me, and like things that just didn't matter anymore. And that's really what got me and helped me so much in business. The first thing I had to overcome was the peer pressure. When somebody wants to ridicule you for now this, oh, now you're a Jesus freak or you're a Bible thumper or something like that, and not taking the bait. And that wasn't easy. And fortunately, I had some people that I had learned to reach out to, my friend back in New Jersey and some others, and my customers. I mean, here I am in the Midwest, and I'm calling on customers, and I'm starting to realize that they, have the same faith that I have, but they're way, way more advanced. I mean, like
Hmm.
when I met Kathy was, really the biggest transformation because she really guided me through this Protestant faith that I had that wasn't linked to a Roman Catholic church.
Yeah.
So I started acting differently, and then realizing that I either had to give in and compromise my beliefs or my values, but that never really felt right to me, So I would just stand and say, well, I believe what I believe, and
Yeah.
if you want to know more about it, I'm happy to talk to you about it, and
Yeah.
usually they go running when you start asking them.
But I bet you learned a lot from your customers.
Oh my
You were
gosh.
able to have those conversations, right? And
Yeah.
yeah.
I had a customer in Canton, Ohio. I have to ask John Beckett if he knew this customer of mine, but he was raised Amish, and he was a big customer. And I knew that he was a very religious man, as they say, and
Mhm.
so I was a bit intimidated. He was, oh my gosh, he just literally took me under his wing. If I had a question, he had a sermon for it,
Yeah.
as a response. But he was not pretentious at all. I mean, you wouldn't know that the man had two nickels to rub together, let alone tens of millions of dollars.
Mhm.
That kind of a relationship. And I reached out to him many times over the years. He went to be with Jesus about 5 years ago, but I still keep in touch with his sons and some other folks from his company.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get deeper into that because, you know, the legacy that you're leaving behind, that you are building to leave behind, Tom, is faith runs through that. I mean, the thread of faith and what you're doing with your grandkids. So I want to talk about all that. But let's talk a little bit about just work. So I know you said that you have a degree in accounting and business administration. You had some post grad work at Wharton,
Right.
great school, but you work for Guinness Harp. You also work for Gangnail. I think you worked for Gangnail where you were over sales for 19 different states, right?
Yeah. Gangnell was one of the legacy companies of MiTek.
Yes.
MiTek was formed as a holding company here in St. Louis, and they owned two of our competitors, actually. And then we became part of the MiTek family, but we all had our own brands. It was kind of interesting navigating through that in the marketplace. The customers are not stupid. They realize they think you're trying to create a monopoly, and we weren't trying to create a monopoly, but we were trying to consolidate and make a little bit more sense out of, there were 22 companies that did what we did at that time. And so even though there were three of us that had kind of joined forces, there's still another, 19 out there that we had to compete against.
Right.
We were. So, and we ultimately did in 1991, we did away with the individual brands. So Gangnil went away as a brand. The St. Louis company Hydro Air went away as a brand, and then another one we had called Panel Clip, and we just all went under the MiTek banner. So that all took place. I started in sales. I was in the field as a field sales guy for 6 years. I got more states. I got more responsibilities. There were different divisions. I started covering sales for different divisions, and then my first sales management position, I was transferred to Miami, where the headquarters of Gangnell was, and I was still the low guy. I was the sales manager of the smallest division in the company, and then eventually I became director of sales for all of it, and then VP of sales, and then ultimately I became president of Gangnell. So,
Yes. Right.
so I was president of Gangnell when we decided, and there was a president of Hydroware and a president of Panel Clip, and we decided to consolidate. So
Mhm.
that was kind of the evolution of my career and how I ended up in St. Louis when we consolidated everything. Gene Toombs was already working for the company. He had been running another division of started as Gangnell, but of MiTek, and it was a wood products division where our products were mostly metal products and machinery. And Gene and that business was doing terrible, and Gene was hired to either fix it or sell it, and it was unfixable. And he told the owner of our company at the time was Paul Cornelson, who was a lifelong St. Louis guy. He was the number two man at Ralston Purina, and he left and bought this company that was failing, and he brought it back to life, and he hired Gene, And then Gene said we have to sell it, so we sold that company. And then Gene that was the first time he ended up my boss. So when we consolidated, and I came to St. Louis, we split the country into three divisions, and I had one of the divisions. So I went from a president of a business unit to vice president of the Eastern Division.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of how it all evolved. And that's how I got to know Gene. But I knew him before. In fact, I actually advised him. He would ask me, how to navigate through some of this industry stuff that he knew nothing about. But
Yeah.
he was a quick study, and he learned a little bit from me, and I learned an awful lot from him.
Isn't that the way it goes? Isn't that the way it goes? I mean, mentor, mentee, you learn as much, right?
Absolutely.
Love Gene Toombs. I served on the junior achievement board with him
Oh
for
yeah, he
a
was. Yeah,
long
yeah, yeah.
time and loved him. And of course, I had an affinity for him immediately because my dad's name was Gene.
Ah,
And I would always tell him, yeah, my dad actually got to meet him one
good.
time before he passed away. Yeah, before my dad passed away. And then, of course, Gene passed away a few years ago. But let's talk about MiTek a little bit because MiTek is really known for its strong culture and core values. Um, why? What were the four? I think there were seven core values
Oh gosh, yeah,
that, and you say the core values are unchangeable, right? The way that we go about things can
yeah.
change because methods change, but the core values themselves. Well, do you remember some of those core values? I'm sure you
Oh
do.
yeah. Well, the number one, I still remember how we came up with those core values. I had left my tech for about 18 months. I actually was still I was still working on a big project for my tech the whole
Yes.
18 months. I wasn't actually employed by my tech, and then Gene called and asked me to come back because he wanted to retire in a year or two, and he wanted me to come back to be CEO. So, which I actually didn't want to do. I didn't want to come back, and Kathy didn't want me to go back. And then a lot of prayer about that
Yes.
was because we would have an opportunity to put a little bit of a different flavor on the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came back, and I actually I was attending a sales meeting as an observer. I was just I knew a lot of the guys from the old days, when I was there and running the sales department, and and we went through an exercise to identify core values for the company.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought this is really cool. This is something I would have wanted to do once I became CEO. And but we did it, and there were 35 in the room. We broke up into seven groups of five. They even insisted that I be part of one of the groups. But they identified all these candidate core values, all the kinds of ones that you would think, of teamwork and all the things. And what I was most proud of all the time, I was there from that point through my career as CEO. It was that unanimously, this team of 35 picked integrity as number one,
Oh,
and that meant a lot to me.
yes.
So it was, integrity. It was a passion for excellence. It was a commitment to the customer. It was ownership minded. There were values where I don't remember every one of them, but there were seven
Yeah.
core values that we came up with, and they were
Right.
all very very special.
Well, Tom, let me ask you this. And Drucker, right, famously said, culture will eat strategy for breakfast. Why is culture I mean, strategy is important too, but I think it's culture's every bit as important, if not a little bit more, even than strategy. You can have a great strategy, but if you've got a lousy culture, why is that important?
Huh. Well, culture is insidious in both a good way and a bad way.
Yes.
Culture actually is like a living organism in your organization, and it can be a very disruptive if it's not the right culture. We had a great culture at MiTek. Gene did a great job of instilling in us that customers were so important. It wasn't always like that because the predecessor to Gene was more of an operations guy, so it was more about financial stability. It was real. The customers were a means to an end instead of really being the prize. The customers are the prize,
Right.
and
Yeah.
Gene he really instilled that. To the point where that never went away. I always said we started with entrepreneurs, so we were just, that kind of a company. We were sort of an innovative company, and then we became a process driven company and financially driven. And then under Gene, we became a customer driven company. And then I wanted us to be a value driven company. I wanted us, and none of the others ever went away. They nested, is what
Yes.
happened.
Yeah, you need them all.
Every one of them. So it
You
wasn't,
need
I mean,
all of
I
those.
always displayed them never in that kind of an order, but always in a continuum, because they're constantly, connected with one another. And culture just really, it just made all the difference in the world. It's because you want people to come to work because they want to come to work, not just because they have to come to work.
Right.
And that was one of the things. I had a friend that would say, "You can get up in the morning and go, oh, I have to go to MiTek today," or you can get up in the morning and say, "I get to go to MiTek today." And that's
Exactly.
a big difference.
Right.
I've talked to other people that you and I both know together, and yourself as well. You and Greg are an example of that. And I always wanted to make sure people didn't come to my tech every day just because it was a job, or
Yes.
the first time they got an offer for more money that they were going to leave. I really felt great about finding out that people were being approached and not leaving because they didn't want to leave my tech,
Right.
because we actually believe that everybody was entitled to dignity and respect regardless of their role in the company. It didn't matter if you were the CEO, if you were the head of sales, if you were a packer on the stamping line, or whatever it might have been. And we started to really get that. It took about 5 years to really see it on autopilot.
Yeah, that's so good. That is so good. Well, I know that one of your philosophies, Tom, was empowerment. And you said almost to the point of abdication. In
Yeah.
fact, I read something that said sometimes I felt like, wow, it really felt like you weren't doing anything because you had abdicated. But why is healthy empowerment? What does that really look like? And I do think it's important. People want to have that ownership, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my most favorite things to talk about. Empowerment. You can't pay lip service to that. If
Yeah.
you say that, and that was one of our core values. And thanks for prompting me. And
Yeah.
so empowered people is one of our core was one of my tech's core values. And you can't say that and not do it. I used to say, I had a saying, I know it's going to sound weird, that if we're going to say we are who we say we have to be who we say we are.
Yeah. So good.
So I would tell CEO friends, when they would say, "Our people are our most valuable asset," and I could love these people very much, as my friends. But I would say, don't say that unless you are really delivering on that, because your people know the difference.
Yeah.
The customers are really not the players. The players are your people. And what you want your customers to experience, your own people have to experience that first.
So good.
So if they don't feel empowered and if they don't feel valued,
Yeah.
they're not going to be as good at that being felt by the customer unless they're feeling it
How
first.
can they? How can they, Tom?
No,
How
they
can they project that when they don't feel it themselves?
They can't. So I
Right.
would tell my friends, I would say, just be silent on that issue. Come up with a different phrase, but don't say our people are our greatest asset when they're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
That was the kind of thing. I remember standing in front of a group in the factory. I used to love to do this. And I learned a little bit of this from a good friend who you know very well, and he just recently passed away, Bob Chapman. And actually being on the shop floor and having conversations, and he had a term for it, and I can't remember what it was, but um, that's what I started to do. And so somebody asked me about this empowerment thing, and cynically, like, yeah, right, and I said, empowerment starts with empowered leaders. So you're not going to feel empowered unless I make sure the leadership team is feeling empowered. And that's exactly what you were referring to about, you almost have to abdicate responsibility,
Right.
but you're not, because you're accountable. I mean, I'm accountable. I'm the guy that has to deal with, my boss, if something goes
Yes.
wrong, and
Yes.
even no matter who did it, it's still, up to me.
Yes.
That whole thing of not, not abdicate, but you have to really empower people, even to the point when they make a mistake,
Like, yeah.
that you don't just come down on them. I mean, you're going to have an opportunity to coach them later, but take care of the problem, whatever it is, and then let's all learn from it. Now, there's a saying, you can't, if you fool me once, shame on me; fool me twice, shame on you, or something like that. But I can't remember the order of that, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
It's one of those things that you know you got to give people a second chance, otherwise they're not going to feel empowered, and that's what we did. And yeah, I had CEOs ask me, "How do you do this?" And I said, they asked me, "What is like one thing I can do to be better at this?" I said, "Get out of the way. Get
That's
out of the
good.
way. If you believe in your people
Yeah.
and they're as valuable as you say and they're as effective as you say, let them do their job. And when they don't, then you have every reason. But if you're interfering all the time, then they're going to say, well, that's really what, I thought you wanted. So that's why I did it. Well, that's not the best reason. Let's put it that way.
Right. Oh, that's so good. I'm reading, you would love it, because I know you're a voracious reader, Tom, but I'm reading John Maxwell's Return on Failure.
Mhm.
And, his whole thing is you're going to make mistakes. People are going to make mistakes. So, like, when you empower, I mean, maybe somebody's going to make the wrong call. But, like you said, you've got to allow them to do that. Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what is the return that you get on that? And just as long as you're learning from it. And like you said, again, if it happens multiple times, then then you may have to make some sort of corrective action for sure.
Mhm. Yeah.
But creating that psychological safety for people to try things and to, how else are they going to grow? How are we going to grow if we don't get to try?
Well,
So,
they're not. They're not. They're just gonna. It's just
yeah,
like pouring a liquid on the countertop. All it does is just kind of spread. It gets shallower the
right.
more it spreads. And that's what happens in an organization.
Yeah, so good. Well, I've got so much more here. I'm hoping that we can get through it, but we do need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with my dear friend Tom Manenti on the Something Extra podcast.
In business, the tendency is to seek out partners who are bigger, faster, stronger. When it comes to IT, you should be looking for smarter, faster, better. That's just what you'll find with the talented technologists at Technology Partners. Our experts develop custom solutions to tackle your most complex challenges, all to simplify your processes in the smartest, most efficient way possible. The time to be swift and nimble starts now. Go to technologypartners.net/solutions and see what's possible.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Something Extra podcast with Tom Manenti. This is like a masterclass in leadership, people. So just get your pencils out, get your journals out. You're going to want to write stuff down here. But Tom, you tell this story about your grandfather and your grandfather that had the barbershop. And it's such a powerful picture of an ownership mentality. And I know that that was part of, think like an owner, right? Tell that story, what your grandfather would do, and then, why is personal ownership, why does it matter so much?
Yeah. Well, my grandfather, it's my father's father, and this was in the Bronx, and he had a barber shop and on what they called Avenue St. John or St. John Avenue. My grandparents used to call it Avenue St. John, but and uh, and I used to see as a kid. I mean, as a little kid, 4, 5, 6 years old, my dad would bring me to the barber shop, and I would see my grandfather when there weren't people in the chair. And he would be outside sweeping in front of his shop. And I asked my dad one time, why did Grandpa always sweep in front of his shop? And he told me that Grandpa always felt that if as long as he sweeps in front of his shop and the person next to him and the person after, all those stores would sweep in front of their shop, eventually the whole street is going to be clean. So it was that mentality of, you have an owner. I don't own this, but I'm going to keep this part of my when I'm a steward over,
Yes.
clean, and it's going to be inviting, and it's going to be the right, environment for people to respond to. But yeah, I'll never forget that he said, yeah, if every street in every city did that, the whole city would be clean, and that would be a good thing. And we need more of that today, quite frankly.
Yes, we do. And it's so metaphorical, right? For an organization.
Yeah.
because everyone in the organization owning their role, being the best version of themselves in their role, I mean, the organization is going to run so much better, right?
Yeah, and you do it not he wasn't doing it for somebody to pat him on the back and saying
No.
his name was also Tom, and he, hey, Tom, you keep your shop really, swept clean or whatever. No, it wasn't that. It was just this intrinsic, thought that this is the right thing to do. And then you would see them all doing it,
Yeah.
different times of the day.
That's so cool. What a great. I love that lessons like that will just stick with you, won't they? And they're so transferable, I feel
Mhm.
like. I mean, I talk about Allie a lot. I just feel like I've learned so much from her just watching, that can be translated into leadership lessons. But we see that every day if we've
Mhm.
got the eyes to see it, right?
That's
And
true.
I love that. Well, let me ask you this. What are some leadership lessons, Tom? And you have 7 grandkids, or do you have 8 now?
No, we have seven.
Seven,
One
seven,
for each
one,
day of the week.
one for every day. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that because I love, love, love what you do with your grands. But, and I'm sure you're imparting these kind of lessons all the time. But what are some leadership lessons that you think younger generations need to learn today?
Well, you know, I, the number one thing is trust. Um, I learned a long time ago in sales. I was not a great salesman, by the way. I just was a relationship guy.
Yeah.
I really never saw. I used to do a little talk called "I've never sold a thing in my life."
Yes.
It's always funny in the company with the technical guys. They go, "Wait, this guy heads up sales. He never sold anything." But I didn't. I created relationships, and then eventually, I mean, I would talk about our products because they would ask me questions, and then one day they would say, we need to buy one of those machines, or we need to start doing business with you, whatever. And then I just, said, okay, great, I'll set it up. But it's so it really people buy from you because they like you and
Yes.
they trust you. Now your product has to obviously, be relevant to their business, and it needs to be reasonable quality and competitively priced. But that's not the main reason that people continue to buy from you. They buy because they trust you. And it's the same thing in leadership. I always say that leaders lead. Anybody who said with some false humility, "Well, I like to lead from behind." What is that all about? I mean, lead from behind. No, leaders lead. You got to get out in
Yes.
front. And I had a friend, somebody that you probably know, but I won't mention. He said to me one time, he says, "How do you know if you're an effective leader?" I said, "Look over your shoulder, see if anybody's following you. Just look around." And if they're really not following, if they're just waiting for the next thing, the next command that you have for them, that's not leadership.
Mhm.
I don't know what that's called, but it's not leadership. Anyway, it's not effective leadership. So trust. Trust is so important. I talked about the 7 keys of trust. A friend of mine wrote a book called People First, and uh, and the 7 keys of trust, as he articulates in the book, are character, competence, confidence, caring, communication, consistency, and commitment. And when I was asked one time at a Fellowship of Christian Athletes national meeting, I was being interviewed, and they asked me, "What one word would you say is the best uh, virtue for leadership?"
Mhm.
And I said consistency. And I didn't know anything about this book. I hadn't read this. I didn't even know Jack at the time, and I said consistency. I said because the book of James says that a double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways, and let not that man think he'll receive anything from God.
Mhm.
So I thought, well, I don't want to be that kind of guy, and I don't want to follow that kind of guy. I mean, who wants
Right.
to follow a double-minded person, says one thing and does another, or says one thing today and says a different thing tomorrow? Those are double-minded things. So consistency to me is it covers a lot. It's just like love fulfills all of the law, that kind of thing. And so consistency is one of the seven, but trust really is the key.
Yes.
And trust is so easy. I used to tell our sales guys, I used to call it the 10-10-10 rule. And I
Yes,
said,
I'm so glad that you're talking about that. because I was going to ask you, talk
The
about
10
the
10 10
10
rule.
rule. Yes,
I told you that one before, huh?
yes.
Well, the 10 10 10 rule is simply it may take you 10 months to get a customer. You can lose them in 10 seconds. And
Yes,
if you're lucky, you might get them back in 10
10
years.
years. Yeah,
And so it just goes to show you, choose your words and everything, because you can say the wrong thing in less than 10 seconds, and somebody. And I saw that happen in our company. I remember a guy. It was with this mentor of mine from his name was Abner Yoder from Ohio, and just one little statement totally offended Abner. And if there weren't some of us that had a closer relationship with Abner and talked him off the ledge, we could have lost all of Abner's business.
yeah,
So those kinds of things are important. So trust, really, just like in a marriage. I mean, you don't ever want to breach that. I mean, you breach that, it's, oh gosh, it's almost impossible to really,
to rebuild.
yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So, shout out to our friend Jack Lanham. Hi, Jack. Get Jack's book. Jack is phenomenal. He is phenomenal individual and just leadership guru, Jack Lanham. Um, but Tom, like, what are some of those things that you think can build trust? Consistency is one of those, right? Being consistent with what you say and what you do. What are some of those things that can build it? And then, I mean, you can, like you said, you can tear it down in 10 seconds.
Yeah. Well, people can see right through any kind of a
Fake.
disingenuous,
Yes.
approach to leadership.
Yes.
So, I was saying earlier, you can fool the spectators, but you can't fool the players.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
when you don't realize that the people, who are reporting to you, especially, that they're the players. So, you don't want to try to fool them because they know better.
Yeah.
So, you don't want to do that. And when you deliver a steady diet of that, they see through it, and it's just phony. And people, they really snuff that out. So that's one of the things that I think is important, that you be transparent, you be consistent. You have to, um, you really have to be humble, and
Yes.
and people, that people don't. What's the old saying? People don't care how much you know until they know how
You
much
know how
you
much you
care.
care?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and that's true. I mean, I always wanted to. I knew how I wanted to be led, and for a long, long time, I was not led that way. That until Gene Toombs came along, and believed, a lot of the things I believed. I was just really, kind of like a salmon swimming upstream, it seemed.
Mhm.
And then, but when you have that, and you don't, I want to be led. I want to lead the way I wanted to be led. So if I
Yes.
wanted to be led that way, then I need to be a leader that way.
So good. We could do a whole podcast just on trust and how you build it and how it can be lost, right?
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
I'm so glad that you talked about the 10-10-10 because I was going to ask you that. Well, um, okay, so what our listeners might not understand is MiTek is now owned by Berkshire Hathaway.
That's right.
So I wanted to ask you a couple things about Uncle Warren. Okay. Uh, Warren famously said intelligence and passion can never make up for a lack of integrity, right?
Right.
And so, for you, you've already talked about that was the number one core value that all 35, it's so integrity is everything. And again, going back to trust, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have integrity, then trust is going to be broken. But what was it like working under Uncle Warren?
It was easy, actually.
Easy.
It was easy. He was a great example of what empowerment looks like, and he, he says this all the time. I think annually, they probably still do. They run the clip of Warren testifying before Congress, when he was testifying because of the Solomon Brothers insider trading scandal, back in the early '80s, I think. And he runs that, and he takes total responsibility for what everybody had done wrong in the company, and vowed to change it and turn it around. And he did that. But he would just remind us that we can afford to make mistakes. We can afford to lose money. We can afford to lose a lot of money. But what we can't afford is to lose one shred of our reputation. And so
So good.
I just love the fact that, I reported to somebody like that, and Gene worked like that. This year it's 25 years since Warren bought our company. July of 2001 was when he bought the company, and so 25 years. It's to see the company do so well is really good. But that's what working for Warren was easy. He had very few rules. If you want
Yeah.
to call them
He
that,
was
or
pretty hands off, right?
very
Yeah.
totally hands off, and he would be lighthearted about things, and you didn't have to lie to him if he was talking about financial things that were way over your head. I would just say,
Mhm.
I would tease him, and I would say, you keep talking like that, we're going to have to switch to baseball. He's a huge baseball fan, and he knows
Yeah.
I am. So that's one of the things that
Yeah.
we would do.
That's so good. So good. And I love what you said he said. That we can lose a lot of money, but we
Mhm.
can't afford to lose 1 ounce of reputation. It's
Right.
everything. It really is. Um okay. I've got so much more here, but I want to kind of get into some of more personal things. I mean, you've said, I read somewhere, Tom, where you said you wanted to finish well. What does finishing well mean to you?
Well, my daily prayer for myself, I do actually pray for myself, and my daily prayer for myself is that I can be as healthy as possible and as strong as possible for as long as possible, whatever that is, so that I can serve God and lead my family well. And that really is my mission statement, I guess you would say, here in retirement, because as there's a line from the television show Blue Bloods, where Frank Reagan says, "All I know is I'm closer to the end than the beginning." So I know that,
Yeah.
and so I'm thankful for the opportunities to pour into my grandchildren. I don't know if my adult children are going to allow me to pour much more into them. They're probably about bursting at the seams. My youngest, she just turned 40, so they're moving on in their lives, but their children mean everything to Kathy and me, and we do our best to pour into them. So really, that's what's important. So finishing well to me is really living a life of significance in some way. So wherever we can, that's what we try to do.
Yeah. I heard somebody say the other day, Tom, and I thought it was so good that when they enter heaven, they want to enter exhausted.
That sounds like something my friend Larry Collette would say.
It wasn't Larry, but Larry could have said that too. But it wasn't Larry; it was somebody else that I was listening to, and they said they want to enter heaven exhausted.
Yeah.
Because you think, oh, and that's the way I see you and Kathy. I mean, you guys. I know family is everything to you guys. You guys have been married for how long now, Tom? 47 years.
47 years this year. Yeah.
47 years. Give us a couple of pieces of marriage advice for a strong family, because you guys, for strong marriage, and then I want to talk to you about kids and grandkids. Because you guys just clearly, you love each other and you have fun. You guys are still great friends.
We are. We've said it for since we were in our 20s when we met, and we just consider each other's best friend. And
Yes.
I know how long you and Greg have been together, so I
Yep.
but I know you
42.
guys are the same way. And we were just with a couple this weekend, and he's 10 years younger than me, and he's about to retire, and they're scared that he's going to retire. What are they going to do? And I think, oh my gosh, it never even dawned on Kathy and me that we want to do anything but just hang out with each other as much as we can, which is what we do. Now I traveled a lot in my
Yes.
career. I never really kept a log of all the miles in all the countries, but I know I've been to over 40 countries and all over the world. And Kathy really, she held the fort together. And to answer your question, one of the things is that Kathy and I, especially on all the big things, we were on the same page. And if for some reason we weren't, maybe we were just like peeking at the page, we weren't on it, we would talk about it and make sure. And always did that alone. We didn't do it. We didn't hash that stuff out in front of our kids, at least
Yes.
not that I can recall. So, I mean, I'm not saying that we didn't ever have, a flare up or something.
Right.
Kids I've had, well, our adult kids have said, when we've seen Kathy and I don't realize we're doing it. I mean, some of my grandchildren say, "Why are you and Grandma arguing?" We're not
We're
arguing. What are
discussing.
you talking about? It's like, so we
We've
don't
heard
even
that
know
too,
we're
Tom.
doing it. Yeah, but the kids, the older ones will say, our own kids will say, okay, no fighting in front of the children, meaning them,
Yes.
and we're not.
Yes.
It's just that,
Yes.
but when you're together that long, you almost, you can finish each other's sentences. All of that exactly what I'm talking
That's
about.
right.
But the main thing, Lisa, is that that we compromise has become a dirty word. And I don't mean you never compromise your values, your ethics, and things like that. Like you said earlier, that those are immutable.
Yes.
But compromise is okay. I mean, I remember when in politics, which I actually hate politics, and I don't talk about it very much. But in politics, they used to be compromise positions, where they had actually there was such a thing as a bipartisan decision on something, and you don't see very much of that. And so, I mean, in the simplest form, Kathy wants to see a movie, and I really don't want to see it, but I go see it anyway. She wants to see it, and
Yeah.
you know what? What movie I just went to see? I think we had this conversation. I had never seen The Devil Wears Prada original movie. I'd never seen
Yes.
it. Kathy's
Yes.
had it on, and it's been on in the background, but I've never really watched it. I kind of knew what it was about. And then that number two came out a few weeks ago, and I'm the one that said, "Hey, why don't we go see that movie?" And she looked at me a little strange, and I said, "Yeah, why? Let's go ahead. Let's go see the movie." So we went to see it. I loved it. I had a great time. I wasn't
Oh,
expecting to love it, but it was fun. It was fun to watch
yeah.
together. But I know that I get great joy out of seeing joy in my children, my grandchildren, and especially my wife. So somebody told me one time, you need to. He's the guy that holds me accountable, and he said you need to do a better job of making Kathy feel radiant.
Oh,
And don't ask me to define it. It's one of those things where you can say, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
yeah.
And when she's radiant, it's really fun
Life is good.
fun
Life is good when she's radiant.
to see. It's almost really like a bit of an elixir for me,
Yeah.
uh, that she's that way. And so yeah, so that the compromise thing it's important. That
Yeah.
you're able to say, that wouldn't be my preference, but if that's important to you, we're going to do it.
Yeah. That's so good. So good. Well, I've got to ask you this. This is so important. I've got to ask you this, and then we're going to talk about something extra. And I really seriously think we could do a 5-hour podcast here, Tom, but we're not going to do that to our listeners. Your
Yeah,
grandchildren, you've got 7 of them. Katie, you've got all these amazing grandchildren, 7 of them, 1 of them for each day.
right.
And I will never, ever forget, Tom, you telling me what you do for each of your grandchildren. And I want you to tell our listeners, because there could be a listener out there that wants to adopt what you do to stay connected with your grands.
Well, somebody had pointed out when our youngest grandchild, who's the only boy, by the way, and he'll be 6 years old, he was born on Warren's 90th birthday.
Oh, that's
Yeah, he
awesome.
was born August 30th, 2020, and that was Warren. That was a fun conversation with Warren, by the way. He was going to try to get an early admission for my grandson to Nebraska.
Oh my goodness.
He was going to try to get a commitment. He was trying to get a commitment letter signed, but so when I had the seventh, just somebody just passing said, "Oh, one for each day of the week," and I was in prayer the next morning, and I went, "That's pretty cool." And so I started a thing. I just call it, our grandchildren's precious texts. I call them the precious seven. So So here's the days of the week. Monday is Sophia Day. Today's Katie Day. Tomorrow's Livy Day. That's Olivia. Thursday is Anna Day, Mariana. Friday is Nora Day. Saturday is Maddie Day, Madeline. And Sunday is Tommy Day. And so Thomas caps it off on Sunday. And I just started by sending a text. And they used to be short texts. They got to be pretty long, and none of them complain. But I send them a text and just kind of catch up what's going on. And then there's always a prayer section, where I have a unique prayer for them. I don't cut and paste anything. I just pray about what I should pray about for them, and then I share it with them, and I do that every morning. So this morning I sent that out to Katie, and Olivia will get hers tomorrow, and most of them respond. If nothing else, they send me back a heart. Most of them respond. So they know I know they got it, and they read it. And Katie is probably one that.
Yeah, but sometimes you said that she even will send you something back.
Oh yeah,
something that she's learning, right?
Oh,
that will bless you.
Yeah, Katie's probably the best at that. Nora's pretty good at it. Nora's only 12, and she's pretty good at responding and giving me a little bit of feedback. Olivia, who's graduating next week, so from high school.
Yeah, I just love it so much. What a legacy! What a legacy, Tom. And you have no idea where you're sitting. Just what that text may do for them that day.
Right.
It could just set their mindset in a completely different way. So I just love it. But okay, this is called Something Extra. And I ask every leader this: what do you believe, Tom, is a something extra that every leader needs?
Well, I don't think there's any big secret about it. But what Jim Collins wrote about it in Good to Great, and it was about level 5 leadership, and the X factor for a level 5 leader was humility.
Yeah.
And that comes in a lot of different forms. It comes in, I mean, not everybody's like me, and I'm willing to talk about anything about my life. They're not quite that transparent, but some of the things that go along with humility. Here's a practical one where you admit your mistakes. I caused that. That's my fault, and as CEO, if you're not willing to do that, then you're not going to get to that special, maybe promised land of culture that you're looking for in your company. Mm-hmm. So I believe it's humility.
Yeah. So good. Well, Tom, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much. I know that everything we talked about today and your story and your wisdom is going to help our listeners. And I count it a real blessing to count you and Kathy as friends of ours.
Well, I couldn't have done it without Kathy. I can tell you that.
All right. Well, very good. Well, have a great rest of the day, my friend.
Thanks, Lisa. Take care.
Something Extra with Lisa Nichols is a Technology Partners production. Copyright Technology Partners, Inc. 2019. To learn more about this week's guest, check out the show notes at tpi.co/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider leaving us a review. Thank you for listening to Something Extra.